It is hard for people who have not lived in Los Angeles to realize how radically Santa Ana's figure in the local imagination. The city burning is Los Angeles' deepest image of itself. Nathaniel West perceived that in the day of the locusts, and at that time of the 1965 Watts riots, what struck the imagination most indelibly were the fires. For days, one could drive the harbor freeway and see the city on fire, just as we had always known it would be in the end. Los Angeles weather is the weather of catastrophe, of apocalypse, and just as the reliably long and bitter winters of New England determine the way life is lived there, so the violence and the unpredictability of the Santa Ana affect the entire quality of life in Los Angeles. They accentuate its impermanence, its unreliability. The winds show us how close to the edge we are. This is the closing passage from the essay The Santa Anas by Joan Didion, which vividly describes how the Santa Ana winds, with their dry, hot breath, seem to seep into the very fabric of society, exacerbating anxieties and tensions. This essay is a part of a collection titled Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which was written by Joan Didion in 1968 and takes its title from the poem The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. The essays mainly describe her experiences with the social and cultural landscape in the 1960s, especially during her years in California. While Didion's essay speaks to a more general sense of unease, it resonates deeply with the experiences of those affected by the wildfires in LA currently. The fear, the displacement, the loss of homes and loved ones, these are the very real consequences of a climate fueled crisis that is increasingly impacting our lives. Witnessing places that hold such dear memories that remind me of my Golden State years being reduced to ashes in what seems like an instant has been truly terrifying. I still have many loved ones facing this terrible crisis, and I can't even begin to imagine the trauma experienced by those directly impacted by these fires in LA. And today, as a sustainability strategist, it would be a disservice if I don't use this forum and talk about this issue and do as much as I can for climate literacy, as well as to offer my pro bono services for those in need. But before we delve into any of that, I want to offer my deepest condolences and express my heartfelt sympathy for the irreplaceable losses suffered by the affected communities. These weren't just houses, they were repositories of memories, and even when rebuilt, they will never truly hold the same magic, the same connection to the past. Of course, I believe that life is ultimately about people and material possessions are secondary. But I also believe it's important to acknowledge the profound emotional and sentimental losses experienced by those who have lost their homes, their belongings, and their entire life savings in the wildfire. Losses of such magnitude throws one's entire life up in the air, disrupts all the to-do lists, and brings all the yearly goals to a halt. All the energies need to be channelized into gathering the pieces to restore life back to normalcy. Many in my community in LA, as well as globally, have come together to offer their support and resources. And at the end of this discussion, I'll be linking some of these in the description box below with my own offering. For the next few minutes, let's talk about the causes of these wildfires and unpack some of the probable solutions. I'm Chani Srivastav, and you're tuned into the Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast. Beginning January 7th, an ongoing series of catastrophic wildfires have affected the Los Angeles metropolitan area and surrounding regions. The fires have been exacerbated by drought conditions, low humidity, and hurricane force Santa Ana winds, which in some places have reached 100 miles per hour. Recent reports suggest that the wildfires have killed at least 24 people, forced nearly 180,000 people to evacuate, and destroyed or damaged more than 12,400 structures. Most of the damage has been done by the two largest fires, the Palisades fire in Pacific Palisades and the Eaton fire in Altadena, which are now being called the most destructive fires in California's history, according to CAL FIRE. So, what's behind these wildfires? And why are they only growing more intense over the years? Fire is a natural part of California's landscape, but there are a whole host of reasons why they've gotten so bad in recent years. And keeping with the theme of our podcast, I'll be talking about four major reasons that are obviously intricately interconnected with each other, resulting in unyielding fires through the state. The four topics that I'm going to be touching upon today are climate change, water scarcity and infrastructural challenges, long term suppression of fire, and wildland urban interface. Let's begin with climate change. And just to emphasize what we are dealing with here, please remember that no matter which definition of climate change you pick, it'll only point to one cause, and that is human activities. Since the 1800s, it has not been sun's activity or erratic volcanic eruptions that has caused the temperatures to rise, but human activities. We have successfully and carelessly burnt fossil fuels to a point that the greenhouse gases released in the atmosphere have trapped massive amounts of heat and raised our global temperatures to unhealthy levels. If we are not in complete denial about its existence, then we lovingly refer to it as global warming and shift the blame on it whenever there are disruptions in the natural order of things around us. I'd like you to put a pin on this thought and see how this imbalance that we have created reflects in each of these 4 points that we are going to discuss today. Climate change is an imbalance in nature. And hopefully, by the end of this episode, each of us will find some way to contribute in restoring some of that balance. Anyone who has lived in or been in LA knows that the Santa Ana winds are a regular occurrence in Southern California. But the strange part this time around is that they are more violent and more destructive than any other year. These winds, driven by high pressures in the desert, are intensified by the climate change we have induced, which has extended the wildfire season globally by roughly 2 weeks. A recent report by UNEP and Global Resource Information Database highlights how climate change and land use changes are exacerbating wildfires worldwide, even in previously unaffected areas. You'll find the link to this report in the show notes below, where you'll see proof of how wildfires devastate people, wildlife, and entire ecosystems while simultaneously releasing significant greenhouse gases, which further fuels climate change. And that's the reason the UNEP has urged governments to adopt something called Fire Ready Formula, which emphasizes ecosystem restoration to prevent and mitigate future wildfires. Even the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration acknowledges that climate change, including increased heat, prolonged drought, and a thirsty atmosphere, is a major driver of increased wildfire risk in the western United States. While eliminating wildfire risk completely is impossible, the right strategic measures can significantly reduce it. And all the while, it is important to remember that ignoring this issue jeopardizes the achievement of most of the development goals that we know today, whether it is the Global Forest Goals, UN SDGs, or even the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Understanding the root causes of climate change and its link to human activity in any way is the first essential step for predicting future risks and developing effective mitigation strategies. Droughts, which are intensified by rising temperatures, play a significant role as higher temperatures lead to plant stress and massive trees die off. In LA, we can see how those dead trees have become added fuel for fires. In addition to that, LA had erratic spurts of heavy rains in the last 2 years, thanks to the changing weather patterns due to global warming. While they seem beneficial in the short term, they actually exacerbated the situation. This unexpected rainfall led to a surge in vegetation, unfortunately creating abundant fuel for these wildfires all over again. According to a 2023 US drought monitoring report, 99.39% of the state is still abnormally dry or in drought. The reason for that is that short term storms are insufficient to alleviate prolonged drought. And as climate change disrupts rainfall patterns, dry vegetation coupled with increasing wind speeds make the area more susceptible to ignition. It's also worthwhile to understand why forests and natural ecosystems are more vulnerable to drought as compared to irrigated crops. While agricultural practices often involve selecting and breeding drought resistant crop varieties, natural ecosystems lack this level of human intervention. This means that many species within these ecosystems may not be well adapted to withstand prolonged dry periods. Unlike irrigated crop, which receive supplemental water, forests and natural ecosystems rely solely on rainfall and natural water sources. This makes them more susceptible to water shortages during the dry periods. Which brings us to the complex topic of LA's water system. The intense and concentrated nature of these storms has overwhelmed the state's aging water infrastructure, designed for a much smaller population. Los Angeles' water system is a patchwork of municipal utilities. It's ill equipped to handle the demands of large scale wildfires that we are witnessing today. Water shortages during the current fires are partly due to this inadequate infrastructure. High water demand during the fires depleted reserves and lowered water pressure in the hydrant system. It hindered firefighting efforts massively. Reports of fire crews running out of water have sparked a political debate and an investigation into the city's preparedness for such wildfires. The water crisis highlights a complex issue, which is the interplay of climate change, political maneuvering, and also fragments of corporate greed in shaping California's water future. If you look at reports closely, you'll find that firefighting efforts were hampered not by a lack of water overall, but by the city's inability to quickly deliver water to areas most in need. Firefighters and paramedics have bravely dedicated themselves to saving the city, and it's a shame if for some reason they are not provided with all the assistance that they can get at such a time. Ever since the fires in LA started, there has been an overwhelming interest in the politics of water, development, and growth in California. Reports have surfaced that underscore the influence of powerful agricultural interests, particularly large scale industrial farms, on the state's water supply. California's story is one of ambitious, if not entirely successful, terraforming, or should we say, unchecked development. A vast system of dams and aqueducts designed to reshape the landscape by moving water from north to south has enabled the growth of cities and agriculture in arid regions in the state. However, this terraforming project, while ostensibly for public benefit, has largely served the interests of a powerful oligarchy of farmers and developers. Research has shown that by controlling water access, they've driven land values, profiting from the development of previously unproductive land. The historical pattern evident in films like Roman Polanski's Chinatown reveals how the manipulation of water resources has shaped California's development, often at the expense of environmental sustainability as well as social equity. Yasha Levine and Rowan Vernham's award winning documentary titled Pistachio Wars, which is about to release in spring this year, exposes how agrabillionaires, specifically the Resnick family, have amassed control over California's water resources through political influence and legal maneuvering. For the uninitiated, the Resnicks are the wealthiest farming family in California, boasting a fortune of $13 billion and owning a vast 185,000 acres of land. They also have an investment in the Kern Water Bank, a significant reservoir of water in the San Joaquin Valley. While known for their charitable endeavors, the Resnicks face criticism for the substantial water consumption for their farms and their perceived influence over politicians to secure access to this vital resource. A 2016 investigation revealed that in certain years, the water usage of the Resnick's agricultural operations surpassed the combined water consumption of Los Angeles and the entire San Francisco Bay Area. This has led to a system where a vital public resource is privatized, benefiting a few while endangering the environment and the livelihoods of many. While the recent wildfires expose systemic weaknesses in California's water infrastructure, it's crucial to understand that agri-billionaires such as the Resnicks aren't the sole culprits. Firefighters battling wildfires confront a formidable array of obstacles. We've seen reports of how aging and inadequate infrastructure in many regions hindered rapid response and resource deployment. Also, the sheer scale and ferocity of these wildfires demand innovative approaches and unprecedented levels of coordination. This might be a great opportunity for those working in tech to develop better tools to assist firefighters in the future, designed specifically for these kinds of aggressive wildfires. But the point of quoting the Resnick story in the Pistachio Wars is to highlight the larger systemic issue at play here, which we all must pay heed to no matter which country we are tuned in from. The thing to remember here is the ability of billionaire influential farmers to outcompete smaller farmers for water resources. It raises a large question of equitable access and the potential for further exacerbating water scarcity in the region in the future. The California example definitely underscores the urgent need to call for a shift from a system that prioritizes the interests of a few powerful actors towards a more inclusive and equitable approach to water management. This requires a comprehensive overhaul of water rights and resource allocation, which prioritizes equitable and sustainable access for all communities, encompassing urban centers as well as rural regions. Crucially, this revaluation must address the historical injustices inflicted upon indigenous communities during colonization. It must acknowledge and rectify the dispossession of their ancestral rights and the suppression of their traditional practices. Whether in LA or in the Amazon rainforest or in Greece, we've become so good at putting out fires as a part of land management over the past century that it's led to a huge buildup of fuels, especially in our forested areas. So, when a natural fire comes along, there's a lot more stuff to burn, leading to larger and more intense fires. Specifically for LA, experts suggest that if we'd regularly allowed and incorporated low intensity burning, as had been practiced by native people throughout the state, we'd likely be in a much better place. For centuries, California's landscape was shaped by the intentional fires of indigenous people. These weren't acts of destruction, but they were acts of stewardship, carefully managing to cultivate a diverse ecosystem. But with the arrival of Spanish colonizers, these practices were deemed primitive and outlawed. The subsequent suppression of fire, coupled with the devastating impacts of European settlement and the accelerating effects of climate change, created a perfect storm of mega fires that are now ravaging the entire state. Names like 2018 Camp Fire and the Dixie Fire have become synonymous with tragedy, where entire communities were wiped off the map. But these infernos are a consequence of a century of misguided fire suppression policies that silenced the voices and expertise of the very people who had lived in harmony with fire for millennia. The Spanish, driven by colonial ambitions at the time, saw the intentional burning of the land as a sign of savagery. They failed to understand that these fires were not acts of destruction, but acts of renewal. They were a part of a complex and intricate system of land management, a system that fostered biodiversity, improved soil health, and even reduced the risk of catastrophic wildfires. In 1850, California passed the Act for Government and Protection of Indians, which outlawed intentional burning in the newly formed state. This act, passed even before California achieved statehood, marked a turning point in the state. Indigenous knowledge was criminalized, which severed their connection to the land. And as discussed in the previous segment, agriculture, logging, and the relentless pursuit of economic growth further fragmented the landscape, disrupting the delicate balance that had existed for millennia. Dense forests, devoid of natural openings created by these indigenous burning practices, became tinderboxes waiting to explode. Decades of fire suppression created a dangerous feedback loop. Fuel buildup increased exponentially, creating conditions for even more intense and destructive fires. The very forests that were meant to be protected were becoming increasingly vulnerable. The irony is that the very forces that were meant to protect the forests were ultimately contributing to their demise. But a growing body of evidence is helping demonstrate the wisdom of traditional indigenous burning practices in controlling these fires. As Ron Good, tribal chairman of the North Fork Mono Tribe, eloquently states, "We're not burning for acres, we're burning to restore the land." Cultural burns, as they are called, are not about simply setting fire to the landscape. They are about carefully tending to the land, promoting the growth of beneficial plants, and restoring the ecological balance that has been so profoundly disrupted. A powerful example of this is the Illilouette Creek Basin in Yosemite National Park. Researchers who studied this area, where lightning ignited fires have been allowed to burn naturally, found that the landscape reflects the diversity and resilience that existed before the era of fire suppression began. It is now one of the few places in the state that actually provides that kind of information because there is no evidence of changes in the fire size or in the severity of fires that burn in the area. So, even though the ecosystem is being impacted by climate change, its feedback is so profound that it's not changing the fire regime at all. We all take something away from this research, as it underscores the importance of allowing fire to play its natural role in the ecosystem, a role that indigenous people have understood for millennia. As Lenya N. Quinn Davidson, a fire advisor and the director of the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council, emphasizes, it's time to reclaim the balance and rebuild the relationship. This is not just about restoring the land, it's about restoring justice. It's about acknowledging the historical injustices inflicted upon Indigenous people and recognizing the profound value of their knowledge, something that even the UN recognizes. By embracing cultural burning, we can not only mitigate the devastating impacts of climate change, but also begin to heal the wounds of the past. It is a path towards a more just and sustainable future, a future where humans live in harmony with land rather than in constant conflict with it. Which automatically brings us to the fourth point, which is the height of human activity in disrupting the natural order of things, the wildland urban interface. This part of our discussion perfectly highlights the complex interplay between human development and the increased risk of wildfires, especially in California. The Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI, is a rapidly expanding area where human development encroaches upon natural landscapes such as forests and grasslands. This convergence of human habitation and wild areas creates a heightened risk of wildfires due to a complex interplay of factors. As human populations expand and seek out desirable living spaces, often in scenic areas with natural beauty, development pushes deeper into fire prone regions. Firstly, the presence of human structures and activities introduces numerous potential ignition sources. These include things like campfires, discarded cigarettes, power lines, and even the sparks from lawnmowers or other equipment like that. Secondly, the presence of homes and other structures within the WUI can create a ladder effect, where flames from ground level vegetation can easily ignite the siding, roofs, and decks of nearby buildings. The fragmentation of natural habitats due to development can disrupt wildlife movement and also disrupt ecological processes. Another issue is the introduction of non native plants and the alteration of natural fire regimes as a result of that. Additionally, the smoke and the air pollution generated by these wildfires in the WUI can have significant health impacts on both humans and wildlife populations. Addressing these challenges posed by the WUI requires a multifaceted approach that involves a combination of land use planning, fire prevention strategies, as well as community education. By working together, communities can reduce the risk of wildfire and mitigate the impacts of these events on both human as well as natural ecosystems. In the face of these interconnected challenges, a truly effective response demands a holistic approach. We cannot simply address climate change in isolation, nor can we solely focus on fire suppression or solely focus on the politics of water management. And believing in the interconnectedness of things, I can say that the solution lies in drawing from the wisdom of literary giants like Joan Didion. The Santa Anas, as she so poignantly observes, expose the fragility of our existence and the precarious balance upon which we stand. Perhaps the mindset shift that this Lock, Stock, and Barrel podcast is all about is imperative in our times when we are to find multidimensional solutions to fight something as aggressive as wildfires. These fires are a stark reminder that our actions and our choices have profound consequences. While communities rally to support those affected, we must also demand accountability from those who profit from our collective vulnerability. Reports have emerged that insurance companies who reap enormous profits while denying legitimate claims have started fleeing from the state. In the interest of humanity and professional ethics, they must be held to higher standards. They must not be allowed to continue to profit from our collective suffering while offering inadequate coverage and unreasonably denying claims. We need stricter regulations, stronger consumer protection, and a renewed focus on the human cost of these disasters. This is not just about rebuilding homes, it's about rebuilding lives. It's about ensuring that those who have lost everything are not further victimized by a system that prioritizes profits over people. Furthermore, the issue transcends national borders. If we think that just because we are geographically distant from these wildfires we are safe, then we are sadly mistaken. Climate change is a global challenge that demands international cooperation and a collective commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to a more sustainable future. As we move forward, let us remember that the LA fires serve as a poignant reminder that we are all interconnected, that the health of our planet is inextricably linked to our own well being. Let us embrace the wisdom of indigenous people, acknowledge the devastating impacts of climate change, and work towards a future where humans live in harmony with the natural world. Let us build a mindset that makes us want a more just and equitable society, one that prioritizes the well being of all, not just the privileged few. And we need to build that mindset, especially if we are among those privileged few, as the future of our planet depends upon it. This moment of crisis is a call to action, a demand for us to confront the realities of climate change head on and to work together to create a more resilient future. At my end, there are a few LA organizations that I'm already involved with to do my bit in my capacity as a sustainability strategist and an IP and tech lawyer. But in addition to that, for anyone who is interested and in need, we have set up a free consultation call, especially for those who've been affected by the fires in LA. You can contact me or my office from the information in the description box below, and we will help you set up the same. You can count on the Locks Online office to hook you up with the right organizations as well as individuals specific to your needs. We are here for any assistance that you need in getting more information on areas like developing long term sustainability plans, building strategies for data recovery and data security, as well as providing assistance with protection for your intellectual property rights. Of course, you can come back to the LTP podcast and newsletter, where we will soon be posting information about workshops focused on long term considerations, such as circular economy principles, that will be free of cost for those who have been impacted by the fires in LA. I know that the internet is flooded with lists of resources and organizations to donate to, volunteer with, so I will not be taking up space for that here. But I will be linking some resources specific for mental health and childcare support, which are also really crucial at this time. Like many of you, I wish I could be there in person to volunteer and to donate physical items. But I read an article yesterday that reported that some organizations are completely overwhelmed with the amount of physical donations they are getting and are no longer accepting any additional donations. We know that for volunteer coordinators, trying to manage donated objects like clothes, blankets, and food can be really difficult at this time. So please be mindful when you're making your donation. One quick way to know what an agency does or doesn't need is to check their website and social media channels before you actually make your donation. As for my social media feed, I'm posting 5 recipes on the LTB Recipe Lab today that can be used as a quick guide for those helping on the ground in LA. Do give that a glance. As you know, it will be saved under a highlight on my profile, and the link, as usual, will be stacked with all the other links in the description box below. The first time I saw an actual acorn was in the Redwood National and State Parks in California. And it's a story that fascinates me till date. Just as an acorn, seemingly destroyed by fire, gives rise to a forest of oak trees, so too can we find hope amidst the ashes of devastation. The fires, while terrifying and destructive, can serve as a catalyst for renewal. Let us learn from the past, embrace the present, and work together to cultivate a future where humans and nature can thrive in harmony. Thank you for listening till the end. You are at the Lock, Stock and Barrel podcast. Do send this episode to someone in need. You can find all the links to this podcast in the description box below. Until we meet again, stay safe and don't give up on hope.